Hello and good evening. Hope everybody is doing all right. Hopefully everybody had a good weekend. Uh yeah, unfortunately it wasn't a very good weekend in the world and we're going to go through some of that. There have been a couple more developments on the Venezuela thing, but I also wanted to kind of mostly look through the history of these things happening and a lot of the propaganda that was used at the time. Hey, how you doing? Welcome. Hope you had a good weekend. So yeah, some of the propaganda that went down at the time and how it really compares to what we're seeing today. And I might be able to get into some other stuff because I have about 35 minutes of the kind of video essay, I guess they're probably called now, not documentaries. But I have about 35 minutes of video, and some of it is really, really relevant to what we're seeing in Venezuela. So if I have some time after I cover the news and get into some of that historical stuff, I'll share uh, some of that video and probably hopefully get some feedback. Good evening, welcome. Because I am relatively new to video editing, so it's all right, but it'll improve over the next couple weeks. Um, but yeah, so on the Venezuela front, the the narrative has been flipping all over the place because I think it's chaotic and they have no clue what is going on because they don't know what they're doing. And we have heard that they're going to cooperate fully and just give the United States the oil, and there will be no problems, no insurgencies, anything like that. And yeah, that is already looking like it's not happening. The vice president that is left in charge, because yeah, they just took out. We say regime change, but this wasn't even a regime change. This was like a very half-assed regime change, because they just took out the main leader with leaving most of everything else intact, which might be good, depending on how easily the transfer of power can happen. But I'm not very confident because of how chaotic things are. And yeah, the vice president has said that she's not going to cooperate with doing whatever, like letting all these American oil companies in, uh, to take their oil. Because the root of the conflict here is, like, you'll hear the Trump administration people say that they stole our oil. That's obviously ridiculous. That was their excuse for grabbing these tankers and stuff, saying that Venezuela owes us oil for some reason. And what their justification is because quite a long time ago, I'm pretty sure it was not even under Maduro, it was under Chavez, nationalized the country's oil production. So it had to stay within Venezuela. And that is when they effectively became a major enemy, and all these sanctions got put against them because they weren't going to cooperate with our oil companies. And the reason why they say that it's theft is because there were outstanding contracts to allow these oil companies to extract oil from there, and in pretty much what was remnants of a colonial system. So they're trying to openly go back to that now. And yeah, so let's take a look at this. This is from uh, It's kind of confusing because they say Bolivarian Republic. It's not. It makes you think it's Bolivia, but no, it's actually the army of Venezuela that they're talking about when they say Bolivarian National Armed Forces. Categorically rejects the cowardly kidnapping of citizen Nicolas Maduro, constitutional president of the Bolivian Republic of Venezuela, our commander, blah, blah, blah. This act was carried out yesterday after the cold-blooded killing of a large part of his security team, soldiers, and innocent civilians. And yeah, the number so far was 40, but it could likely grow because they haven't even really gotten a total count yet, and things are still chaotic and people are still not in communication with everybody throughout the country. So it says, in accordance with the declaration of the Constitutional Chamber, there's a lot of legalese in here, so I'm going to try to speed through it, through which Vice President of the Republic is designated to assume in the capacity of acting president. So they're saying she is acting president, but I've heard a couple different things now. I've also heard that she's like fleeing to Russia as well, but that could just be propaganda. It's really hard to differentiate what's coming through because there is so much propaganda, and that is something that I'm going to bring up too. There has been a lot of AI stuff that has had people very convinced, and uh, they aren't even deleting the stuff after it's proven to be false. Let's see. A lot of this is legalese. So it basically boils down to, in the same vein, the government will guarantee the governability of the country, and our institution will continue to employ all available capabilities for military defense. Accordingly, we will activate across the entire national geographic space. So they're just saying that they are not giving up. They're going to continue to um, work in cooperation with the current sitting government, because that was a big kind of thing that people were worrying about, was, is there going to be a break between the military and the current government that could cause a lot of chaos? Apparently at this time it doesn't look like that's going to happen, um, at least from what we're hearing now. I think that this might be a video of that. I haven't watched this yet. Um, but yeah, I'm coming through in 1080p today because I have a wired connection. So hopefully things actually work. Let's see. He's probably speaking in Spanish. Maybe not. Hopefully it.
Pueblo de Venezuela. Estamos siendo atacados por enemigos que
he's speaking in Spanish. This is a war of resistance. They act with force. We act with truth. I don't know if this is like, yeah, this doesn't look to be a actual military person. But yeah, I did see, in addition to the oil, there's also talk of minerals being a concern. I saw this article was published quite recently talking about U.S. secures civil smelter deal to process Latin American metals, financed by J.P. Morgan, jointly owned by U.S. Department of Defense. Korea Zinc plans a $74 billion investment to construct a large-scale non-ferrous metals in Clarksville, Tennessee, and to expand domestic mineral production. Let's see what it says about Latin America. Let's see. The finance structure adds another layer. JP Morgan Chase is involved in arranging financing for the project. Over recent months, JP Morgan has reduced silver held in COMEX registered inventories and sourced physical metal from Latin America. So it looks like they are expanding in Latin America. These actions reflected activity in physical markets where logistics, jurisdiction, and custody increasing influence procurement decisions. And there was another thing that I was looking up that was it was talking about, there are a lot of minerals and metals and gold that hasn't been mined in the country as well, and they could be using this as another part of their big cash grab. The other thing that I wanted to mention was there was a ton of AI videos going around, and just misleading videos that were going super viral, and it was like most of the celebrating Venezuelan people that they were super happy that their country was being bombed. Most of them were either like here in the US or in another country where they weren't actually living there, or it was just entirely fake. These are some examples of the fake things that were going around, and these were actually shared by Elon Musk as well. Um, and they had other ones where it was like a celebration in Argentina for like the World Cup or something, and people were saying that they yeah that was this one. Um, exactly, it was in Buenos Aires, and yeah, pretty crazy. And then I think there was another post as well that had a couple of them. And I saw these going around, and a couple of them were pretty easy to clock as AI, but some of them were pretty convincing. I had thought that they were probably misleading, but I didn't realize that they were just straight up AI. Like this one was pretty. You could people look a little bit blurry, you know.
El pueblo llora por su
It's pretty
libertad.
convincing though.
Gracias a los Estados
But you could tell by the sound as well. That's another thing with those AI videos is they have this really weird kind of stereo effect. I'm not really too sure how to describe it. But the messed up thing now is this might be a part of the just how foreign policy works now in the U.S. Let's see if we can
having done
get
this
to play.
incredible thing last night of letting somebody else take over, where we have to do it again. We can do it again too. Nobody can stop us. There's nobody that has the capability that we have. You know, when I watch that war in Russia going on and on and on, and everybody dying, and it's like it's primitive. It's primitive. It's horrible.
So yeah, he's talking about doing it again, and there have already been indications that he's looking at all of South America, like any of the South American regimes that aren't compliant with our corporations have got to go. Basically, has is what he said, and he's even talking about Mexico, as I said last night. And now Ryan Grimm posted something just a couple hours ago that let's see, it said that he's ready to kidnap the president of Colombia as well for basically no reason. This is audio only. I'm not sure how it was obtained, but let's see.
Colombia is very sick too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine. Colombia is very sick too, run by a sick man who likes making.
Ooh.
Cocaine and selling it to the United States, and he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
What does that mean? He's not going to be doing it very long.
He's not doing it very long. He has cocaine mills and cocaine factories. He's not going to be doing it very long.
So there will be an opportunity.
Sorry about that.
By the U.S. and
it sounds good to me. Colombia is very sick too. Run by
Yeah, he said it sounds good to me when they asked would there be a similar operation in Colombia. He's like, sounds good to me. So this is not out of the realm of possibility, and that's why even the leaders of Denmark who are in control of Greenland currently are flipping out and are making all these very serious statements saying that we don't want to break in our alliance and please don't attack our probably colony. I haven't looked into the relationship between them and Greenland very much, although I did hear that there is maybe some desire for actual independence. But I really don't know much about that there. That's something that I would have to look into. It is never really thought much about Greenland in a geopolitical sense, but here we are. So he's really looking to expand the whole territory, and this is what he said on his inauguration. So this really isn't that much of a surprise. Hopefully, I I could get some of these other things to play. If I can, I'll just skip ahead to the other stuff. Let's see.
Doesn't have the support or
Maybe not.
and Maria Corina Machado doesn't have the support or respect within the country. And by your own admission, she walloped Nicolas Maduro in the last election. So it does sound like a decision was made. But
She wasn't
today
on the ballot in the last election.
No, but her party was.
Edmundo was.
Yes.
Correct.
So
yeah. It was an
is there an
illegitimate
agreement
election, and that's why he's not a legitimate president.
Right, but is there an agreement to transition to democracy?
I
It
think
sounds
what
like
the
there's
president
not.
pointed out is the obvious. Well, I think what the point, but there has to be a little realism here, okay? A transition to democracy. They've had this regime, they've had this system of Chavismo in place for 15 or 16 years. And everyone's asking why 24 hours after Nicolas Maduro was arrested, there isn't an election scheduled for tomorrow? That's
No, I'm
absurd.
asking what you talked about with her.
These things take time. There's a process.
Right. And you
Well,
are.
I'm not going to publicly get into details about any of those things other than to tell you that our expectations remain the same. And we are going to judge whoever we're interacting with moving forward by whether or not those conditions are met. Of course, we want to see Venezuela transition to be a place completely different than what it looks like today. But obviously, we don't have the expectation that's going to happen in the next 15 hours. What we do have an expectation is that it move in that direction. We think it's in our national interest and frankly, in the interest of people of Venezuela.
So yeah, he basically was stumbling over himself there because they don't have any plan for what happens next. And he's saying, oh yeah, well, there's not going to be an election tomorrow, and people are mad about that. And it's kind of a diversion from the fact that, no, it's just that you have no clue what happens from here. Your only plan was to just go and arrest this guy and then just like let whatever happen there in Venezuela. And the people there are actually scared for the most part, because they're trying to figure out what the hell's going to happen. Whether it is something as simple as their, how they're going to get food, basic stuff like that. Is the supply chains going to get messed up like they have in the past and in any random situation? Of course, in war, you always see that. So those are the concerns that like people are having, those real life kind of concerns. And the oil thing, this is one I saw about the oil, where their companies have probably even known about this before even.
And it is that Donald Trump promised oil executives.
It always at the start of the video like does that.
That if they gave him $1 billion for his campaign, that he would do right by them. And they gave about $500 million. And this is a massive gift that is in violation of international law and is essentially just co-opting an entire country's natural resources for the benefit of U.S. companies. When we have so many things that we need to deal with here at home, none of this affects grocery prices or healthcare or wages or prices of rent. None of this has anything to do with helping those issues, which are central to the American people. We are now venturing. Donald Trump is taking us into another amorphous, shapeless.
The important thing there was the fact that he told these oil executives that he would do right by them. And now he is fulfilling that campaign. Yeah, he definitely seemed like he was tweaking at the end of that for sure. But yeah, it is really, really interesting how he is so blatantly transactional. And it's very ironic because when he was running his first campaign back in 2016, he was like, I'm the rich guy, so I'm the politician that can't be bought. And all these other politicians, they're bought, and I know how it is because I buy them, and I'm the rich guy that buys them. But now you don't have to worry about me. And then he is the most like transactional president of all time, at least openly, So this video is very short, but it is just like the reality show presidency. Apparently, he was paraded through New York with open doors in a van. This is always at the beginning for a couple seconds.
Good job, good job.
That is insane. Like, that is the most batshit thing I have ever seen, and probably a war crime, because I saw people saying that it's um, like public humiliation is illegal when you're taking prisoners of war, and he probably like paraded it through a neighborhood of Venezuelans who left there. Probably a majority of them were business owners who didn't want to be taxed or something like that. And you let people get that close to the vehicles. They weren't letting people get that close to the van when Luigi got arrested, though, for sure. But that is just, when I saw that, I was like, that is one of the most insane things I ever saw. And I made it through Iraq, and that I thought that was crazy. I thought that it couldn't get crazier than that, but here we are. Let's see. Let's see if this was relevant. I saved it for some reason. Says the worst part of Trump's presser was an insult. Oh, this is so I don't think I need to play it because it's like 5 minutes long, and I don't wanna find the important part sifting through this guy. But in this interview here, this guy who used to work for Trump, and he was Trump's former envoy for Venezuela, said that this is like not legal for us to take the oil. So he's, even some of his own people are kind of saying that, you know, this is not going to work. I mean, his former people are a bit different than his current people, because you know, he beefs with people and then it gets serious. So sometimes they end up flipping to the whole other side after going through him. Another concerning thing is that there is a large Venezuelan population here that could be at risk of being deported now. And there are kind of indications in this interview that, like, I'm not sure if they might revoke the green card, and then of course, yeah, then they can chase ICE after them. I'm not sure, but that is a scary possibility. Let's say
thousands of Venezuelans who are here in the U.S. legally through.
Always count on that first couple seconds.
TPS. Here is Miami's mayor yesterday. She says the elimination of TPS for Venezuelans earlier this year was reckless, dangerous, and wrong. No one should be forced back into chaos and uncertainty. I am calling on President Trump to immediately reinstate TPS for Venezuelan residents. Madam Secretary, are you going to force these people to return to Venezuela now, even as their government is in complete flux?
Well, Venezuela today is more free than it was yesterday, and it's going to continue to be that way as long as President Trump is in the White House and is making sure that he's protecting the interests of the American people, because that ripple effect will continue to bring that kind of liberty to Venezuela as well. These programs, we're bringing integrity back to them. The decisions are made in conjunction with the State Department, with the White House, and then we at Homeland Security implement them and make sure that they are followed through. So Every individual that was under TPS has the opportunity to apply for refugee status, and that evaluation will go forward. But we need to make sure that our programs actually mean something and that we're following the law. And that's how that decision with TPS was made.
So if you read between the lines there, what she is saying is that all of the people who are from Venezuela in this country are going to have to reapply for legal status here. And there's going to be an evaluation. And I guarantee you that that evaluation is going to come down on political lines. So just like they're saying how, if you're from another country and you're coming here even to visit, you need to submit your social media history like 5 years back. They're definitely going to do stuff like that for citizens. And if you are not on, Team MAGA, then they're probably going to deport you. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's happened and it's been happening, and this is how they are doing things. So, it's no different than what they did in the training in the foreign land is for the same reason the oil. Yeah, exactly. Every administration has worked to project U.S. colonialism around the world, and it is the uniparty position. It is the main thing that the Democrats and Republicans can always agree on, is that the United States needs to be the unipolar bully of the world. And, we need to have a position of disparity with like every country, even with the rhetoric of Trump's tariff quest is always about, we need to be on top of other people. We need to be getting the best out of every deal. And like, that's, deals should be mutually beneficial. They shouldn't be one side is a clear winner because they're the big dog on the park or whatever. It is very, it's a very twisted way of it being human. You know what I mean? And we've seen this many times before. I know I'm not sure if the Twitch chatter I had last night was on the younger side when he was talking about how the Venezuelans were free now and everything, and maybe he didn't live through Iraq. But there were some key moments from the whole Iraq war propaganda effort that really kind of came back into my head as I was watching all this. And the first one was the toppling of Saddam's statue, because there were a whole bunch of layers to this. I remember watching this happen from school. They put it on in school. They used to do that shit. And it was basic, all these people gather around, they're pulling down the statue, and then the soldier goes up and puts the American flag over the head, and then they tell him not to do that because it's for the people, not for America, and all this stuff. And then it turns out that it was a propaganda effort. It was it was somewhat organic, but it was packaged as a propaganda effort. And then one of the guys who was like the first to punch the statue or to hit the statue or something like that has since said that he regretted it, and he was in Saddam's prison. So we'll take a look at this little breakdown from ProPublica that I remember from way back in the day, and it just talked about the whole media orchestration around the toppling of the statue. And it reminds me a lot of how the media is acting today with the, the liberation factor. Let's see. Doing the same thing. Hopefully it returns after. Here we go. If it doesn't, I have an article, but it should. Oh, okay. It's still going on. No. All right. If not, I'll just go to the article. I'll bring up the article while I'm waiting.
3 weeks into the invasion of Iraq, the famous toppling of Saddam Hussein's statue in Firdos Square was heralded by the media as a symbol of victory.
Jubilant scene.
Man, even with a wired connection. I'll give that a minute and I'll switch to this and then I'll let it load up. So, an Iraqi man who famously took a sledgehammer to a statue of Saddam Hussein during the U.S. invasion 15 years ago looks back on what has happened to his country since then. It was 15 years ago today when American forces took control of Baghdad. At the time, it seemed like a conclusion to a remarkably swift invasion. We now know that the war was just beginning, but it was over for the Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein. And on live television, Saddam's statue started coming down. In Baghdad, NPR's Jane Arif found an Iraqi man who held the hammer. So, let's see. Through an interpreter, this is what the guy says. He says, I was in my garage close to the statue, and I had always had the idea that one day it would come down when I would, that the day it would come down that I could hit the statue and topple it. When the Americans started to enter the city, I took my sledgehammer. Then I went to the statue and started hitting it. He says after a half hour or so, the Marines arrived. One of them greeted him and asked if he wanted help. The Marines brought a tow truck. In a serious error of judgment, one of them placed an American flag on the statue. Jabouri said he bought an Iraqi flag from the social club next door to replace it. He says, I was very happy because the danger, the dictatorship, the dictatorial regime, they were all gone. We were happy to think that there would be change for the people. But then we were surprised. He's so surprised about what happened to Iraq over the past 15 years that he now wishes Saddam hadn't been toppled. Not all Iraqis feel that way, of course, about the man that they acknowledge was a dictator, but a surprising number say they do. Now this is what he says again. That was a brutal regime, but now really I regret hitting the statue. Those who came after are worse than Saddam Hussein and worse than Saddam Hussein's regime. That is why I regret it so much. And that's from a man who spent 11 years in prison under Saddam, who had relatives executed because they were with the Communist Party and the Shia Dawa Party. Like a lot of Iraqis, Jabouri considers today's politicians thieves. He also calls them gang members, criminals, and killers. They haven't improved the infrastructure. They haven't built anything. They haven't done anything for the people. Jabouri is 60 now. He shows me some of his powerlifting medals hanging from the glass in the shop. I guess this is a transcript from an old radio thing. There are photos of some motorcycles. Let's see. After that, it was Harley Davidson. He worked on Saddam Hussein's motorcycles and his son's Uday's. Jabouri said it was Uday who threw him into prison in a dispute over money. Jabouri now says if the U.S. had to topple Saddam, it should have made sure Iraq got back on track. In my opinion, they were working better than those people in power now, but they didn't finish their mission. He still fixes motorcycles. So yeah, this is basically the guy who was heavily involved in, I wouldn't say heavily involved, but he kind of started it, you know? It wouldn't have came down if they didn't bring the vehicle over there to tow it, I don't think. But let's see if this can load.
Begun. The saturation coverage.
Let's see.
Depicted the toppling as a populist groundswell. But it was, in fact, a small event, shaped into greater significance by the media.
The symbolic ending of this.
Firdos Square wasn't the end of a short war. It was the beginning of a long one.
Watching these amazing scenes of ordinary Iraqis, citizens with sledgehammers.
The toppling lasted about 2 hours. The networks almost never broke away.
What is he doing? Oh, there we have it.
Furling an American flag.
This is going to be kind of fascinating and not a little suspenseful to watch here.
I hope they're watching this all over the Arab Street.
Careful examination of those broadcasts and photographs suggests the crowd, which varied in size, topped out at just a few hundred. And it was to a significant degree composed of journalists and Marines.
Just about 5 minutes ago.
Nonetheless, between 11 a.m. and 8 p.m., CNN replayed the toppling every 7.5 minutes. Fox replayed it every 4.4 minutes. Wide shots from the live coverage, which revealed a more subdued reality, were not replayed. The iconic images that shaped public opinion in America did not reveal the actual scale of the event. Though some reporters cautioned editors back home that the event was minor compared to the fighting and looting elsewhere, a visual echo chamber occurred. Rather than find the news, editors urged reporters to focus on what was unfolding on TV.
Similarities between these events and the events back in Eastern Europe.
By the next morning, victorious images commanded front pages worldwide, along with language to match.
Watch the Berlin Wall chip by chip coming down, and then all the statues of the communists.
Robert Collier, a San Francisco Chronicle reporter, awoke to find that editors had recast his story to emphasize triumph at Firdos. I was told by my editor that I had screwed up and had not seen the importance of the historical event.
You have to think that there are going to be some minds changed as a result of these incredible pictures.
By portraying the toppling as a moment of victory, the media conveyed a reassuring message, but a false one.
The scenes of free Iraqis celebrating in the streets, riding American tanks, tearing down the statues of Saddam Hussein in the center of Baghdad are breathtaking. We're seeing history unfold, events that will shape the course of a country, the fate of a people, and potentially the future of the region.
So yeah,
Which
that
the first effort was
it really shows. So yeah, the question in Twitch, what are the regime? The rules are really no regime. Power is the rules. That is what happened in Iraq, essentially. And that could be what ends up happening in Venezuela. But currently, the old regime is still in place, even though the head of it isn't. But there's probably going to be some chaos with that, because who knows if the vice president is going to flee. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't when this happens. So yeah, nothing has changed in the past 15 years. It's all the same game. And it's been like this for hundreds of years, really, with the United States and their their foreign policy, which is that video that I'm making is getting into. But here was another one in the same vein. And this was when both McCain and Dick Cheney were on the TV saying we will be welcomed as liberators, which of course didn't end up happening.
But you think it's working? You think we're going to shake him?
Oh. It'll be better tomorrow. Let's see.
So they will give up eventually and avoid a huge bloodbath of people.
I don't know how long they'll hang out. It doesn't take a large number of people to cause difficulties in house-to-house fighting. We've just seen that in southern Iraq. But there's no doubt in my mind that we will prevail, and there's no doubt in my mind once these people are gone that we will be welcomed as liberators. Look, these guys are the real bad guys, and they're telling everybody, we're going to shoot you. And so, of course, we're not being welcomed because they've got people that are going to kill them if they do.
So, yeah. That is the very similar attitude of what we're seeing now. And of course, in Iraq, we weren't welcomed that way. That isn't how it went down. There was years and years of insurgency because people don't.
I'm confident.
Let's talk about POWs, because
people don't want to be ruled by a foreign power that's going to extract all your resources. And the thing with that earlier clip I played with the statue, there was something very interesting in there about there are so many stories happening at the outset of a war. You know what I mean? There are so many different human stories happening all over the place. And propaganda is not just the things that you say, it's where you decide to point the camera. Like, that is a big, big part of propaganda, because there's an infinite amount of things going on in the world as a journalist that you can pay attention to. And and in a situation like a war, you're going to have very, very dynamic opinions in a society about what about what the direction should be. So, like, it's not like the entirety of a single society agrees with the leader. It's the same way it is here, where you have different factions of people in a society that have different beliefs, and you can't really um lump a whole people together as a big monolith like that. um so I had a another article here on that statue. Let's see if it's relevant. I can switch to this tab. I just grabbed a couple of links that look good, because I wrote about this in my first book. So it was something that I remembered, but I haven't checked all these sources. Let's see what this one says. Remember the toppling of the Saddam Hussein statue in Baghdad that signified the end of the Iraq War? At the time, there were critics who pointed out that the extremely televised image of a jubilant crowd of Iraqis were misleading. The sense of media excitement was unmistakable. As Fair pointed out, the Los Angeles Times ran a headline the next day: "Iraq is all but won. Now what?" The incident is rehearsed and examined in the New Yorker this week, or is rehashed by Peter Mass, who was reporting from the scene that day. He states early on, both sides of the war debate got the event wrong. The toppling of Saddam's statue turned out to be emblematic of primarily one thing: the fact that American troops had taken the center of Baghdad. That was significant, but everything else the toppling was said to represent during the repeated replays on television — victory for America, the end of the war, joy throughout Iraq — was a disservice to the truth. Yet the skeptics were wrong in some ways too, because the event was not planned in advance by the military. So yeah, that's the thing, is that the guy with the hammer, he did start it, but then the military came over and pulled it down with that big harness that you saw that was attached to the vehicle. This struck me as an example of sort of the media false balance, where blame must be assigned on both sides, even when one side is clearly more blameworthy. That's unfortunate, because Mass Report pretty clearly demonstrates that war propaganda need not be orchestrated by clever military censorship or clever public relations. Corporate media are eager to misconstrue and distort events on their own. And yet, that is what we see a lot, is that you have a media that a lot of their top donors are their advertisers are military defense companies. Like, if you look at all those old, I mean, I say old, but like the corporate media, the mainstream stuff, the commercials that they have are like Boeing, Lockheed Martin. Who is sitting at home buying anything from Boeing or Lockheed Martin? Nobody is. The reason why they have those commercials is so the news reporters can't really say anything, because then you're going to lose your advertisers if you say something that threatens your advertiser's business. And I that's always been a big part of it. So that is a very, very good point there. So what did the skeptics get wrong? They believed that the Army report that credited the statue operation, from the placement of an Iraqi flag on the statue's head to the pulling down of the statue itself, to an Army psychological operations unit. Mass notes in this report was picked up by the news media. Hussein statue, the headline read and circulated widely on the web, fueling the conspiracy notion that a PSYOPs team masterminded not only the Iraqi flag, but the entire toppling. The report got very little attention when it was released. I actually remember a prominent journalist asking me to help him find it. It's strange to call it a conspiracy notion unless you believe that the government report taking credit for a particular action qualifies as a conspiracy. What Mass's report is that a handful of military personnel, some of whom had a keen understanding of the sort of imagery that would appeal to the press corps working from Baghdad, decided largely on their own to deliver a spectacle that would attract substantial media coverage. And they were right. If anything, they were slightly quicker than the PSYOPs unit that was on the scene that day, broadcasting messages in Arabic. So yeah, even though the PSYOP team didn't plan it, the PSYOP team was there to make sure that the media got it and in all the right ways. So this is quite long, but let's see if I can flip back to here and get.
Or UN forces should have moved into Baghdad?
No.
Why not?
Because if we'd gone to Baghdad, we would have been all alone. There wouldn't have been anybody else with us. It would have been a U.
This was before. So yeah, this is interesting. Hold on. That was actually the wrong interview. This was from 1993, the Iraq situation. And there was a lot of propaganda leading into that too. Let's see if I can. Where is the? I think. Yeah, there was this issue where I don't know where the link is. I'll have to look it up. This woman testified to the United States or the United Nations, and she said that Iraqi soldiers were pulling babies out of incubators and like throwing them around. I think that is what. Let me switch to this tab here. This is the testimony that got us into the first Iraq war. That was also for oil because it was very, very clearly for oil. There was an issue with them potentially invading Kuwait, which there's a lot of oil there that was friendly with us. So let's see. The testimony was a false testimony given before the United States Congressional Human Rights Caucus on October 10th, 1990, by a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl who was publicly identified only as Naraya at the time, and presented herself as having been a volunteer nurse at the Kuwaiti hospital at the time of the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. In her testimony, which took place 2 months after the invasion, she claimed to have witnessed Iraqi soldiers taking premature babies out of the incubators in a maternity ward before looting the incubators and leaving the babies to die on the floor. Naraya's statements were widely publicized and cited in a number in the United States Senate, numerous times in the United States Senate, and by the American President George W. Bush to contribute to the rationale for pursuing military action against Iraq. Her portrayal of Iraqi war crimes was aimed at the further increasing global support for Kuwaiti against the Iraqi occupation during the Gulf War. So she was like a diplomat's daughter or something like that. In January 1992, it was revealed that Naraya had never been a nurse and that she was the daughter of Saeed Nasser, who was a Kuwaiti politician. Yeah. The Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States at the time the testimony was made. She and her father were members of the House of Saba, the ruling family of Kuwait. So yeah, that they were ruled by a monarchy, and we are defending them essentially. Let's see. Then there is another issue that is very, very oddly like this, and eerily on the anniversary of this situation. Let me get a drink real quick. So this says Venezuelan leader's capture comes exactly 36 years after U.S. arrested Panamanian dictator Noriega. So you may remember Manuel Noriega. He was the leader of Panama through much of the 1980s. He was working with the CIA as a drug dealer. Like he was running a lot of coke out of there, and he was working with the CIA. The CIA was aware of it, and they took him out of essentially when he did not want to let his country be used as a military base to attack Nicaragua, I think. But yeah, and that's when they finally turned on him, and they invaded the country in a assault kidnapping style mission, very similar to what happened with Maduro. And in that one, though, there were a lot of people killed. It was a very messed up situation, and that was one of the things that I was going to talk quite a bit about tonight. Was just that the lineup between these things and how many were hurt during that ordeal, and how we don't even know what's going to happen from here with Venezuela. But let's see what this says. President Trump announced the capture. Let's see. At one time, U.S. ally and CIA informant Manuel Noriega led Panama for much of the 1980s. He was raised in the slums of Panama City and rose to prominence under General Omar Torrijos, who seized power in a 1968 coup. After he was killed in a 1983 plane crash, Noriega took control of the Panamanian government. He was propped up by U.S. officials who paid him hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight drug trafficking. Noriega spent years on the CIA's payroll, assisting U.S. interests throughout Latin America and acting as liaison to Cuba's Fidel Castro. Former U.S. officials testified that Noriega's assistance was crucial to advancing foreign policy interests in South America during that time. Let's see. Noriega fell out of favor with Washington due to his demands for independence and allegations that he was accepting bribes to allow drugs into the U.S. in the late 1980s. Former President H.W. Bush ordered the U.S. military to invade Panama in late 1989, sending 24,000 troops to topple Noriega's government. The operation left 23 American soldiers dead and hundreds more injured. Yeah, I know. I got to get a ad blocker on this browser. Noriega hid out in the Vatican embassy before surrendering to the U.S. authorities on January 3rd, 1990. He was taken to the U.S. to face drug trafficking charges. His fall led to the end of Panama's military dictatorship, but it left a lasting wound on the country. Noriega was convicted of as we'll look at in a minute. Noriega was convicted on drug trafficking charges and spent 20 years in an American prison. He was extradited to France in 2010 to serve a 7-year money laundering sentence there. In 2011, he was sent to Panama to complete a 60-year sentence for murder, corruption, and embezzlement during the military's 3-decade rule. In 2015, Noriega gave his first interview in nearly 20 years from his Panamanian prison. He called himself the last general of the military era and apologized to those offended, affected, injured, or humiliated by his own actions or those of his superiors or subordinates during the military regime. Noriega died after complications. House Intelligence Chair commented on the connection between Noriega's capture and the operation in Venezuela in a statement shared on social media. This is a historic day in the Western Hemisphere. 36 years after the capture of Manuel Noriega, the U.S. showed that we will not allow cartels to take over countries in our shared neighborhood. The arrest of Cartel de los Soles leader Nicolas Maduro shows this clearly, a Republican from Arkansas said. Venezuela should never start the road back to the great nation. Venezuela could never start the road back to the great nation it once was until Maduro was out of the way. I call upon the Venezuelan people to reclaim their freedom. Yeah, I mean, it's too late for that. They could have reclaimed their freedom, but now, I seen something this morning about how many regimes changes in the last so many, can't remember the number of years, and it changes or a part of them. Yeah, definitely. There have been a lot of regime changes, many. And I, like I said, I've been working on that thing where I get into many of them. There's Guatemala, there's Indonesia, there's all these places, and it's been throughout time. We know about the ones that we failed in, like, you know, Vietnam and such. But the ones that we succeeded in are not as publicized. Let's see what this is. Oh, yeah. And here is another interesting thing about Noriega. Yeah, here we go. He was on the CIA payroll, and it's, oh, yeah. So this is another interesting thing on the sub headline here that I didn't even notice when I pulled this up. Allegations that Afghan President Karzai, brother, worked for the CIA, are a member of a long list of distinguished and not so distinguished assets. So this is an interesting name here because that was they were running a bunch of heroin out of Afghanistan, the president and his brother, while we were installing them as a puppet dictatorship in Afghanistan to try to replace the Taliban. And that's exactly why the population rejected them and accepted the Taliban back, because that was what they saw as the only opposition to these, corrupt foreign invaders, essentially. So this says, it's weird how this is laid out, how it's right against the page. So it's because it's old. It's from like 2009, so it's just an editorial thing. Perhaps the most infamous CIA asset of them all was the former director of Panama, now in jail for Miami for drug trafficking. Let's see. I'm not going to go through the rehash of the stuff I just said, but the U.S. looked the other way as Noriega established what would be described as narco-kleptocracy, but the relationship eventually soured and the U.S. invasion ended his rule. So this is just, more confirmation that definitely getting that block. I think that's the end anyway. Yeah. So that's just more confirmation that he was working for the CIA. And let's see if I can. There's another one here that kind of shows what ended up happening. And the reason why I think this is important is because it shows you that, like, all American foreign policy is about strong arming the rest of the world into doing what you want into every single circumstance and making everybody a vassal state, essentially. So let's skip to the important part here. So, this was, after all, the goal of the 1989 U.S. invasion. At the meeting 4 years before Bush ordered Operation Just Cause, then UN National Security Advisor John Poindexter met with Noriega with several U.S. demands. Panama should allow the training of Nicaraguan Contras in the Canal Zone. PDF troops should invade Nicaragua to justify U.S. aggressions toward Nicaragua, Sandinista government. Panama should help dismantle the Contadora Group, a regional initiative to resolve military conflicts that were destabilizing Central America. And Panama should consent to continued U.S. military presence in Panama. Noriega rejected the demands, and Poindexter warned him that he had better think of the consequences. The rest is history. In retaliation, the United States refused to recognize the Noriega government and suspended its canal treaties and the combined board a U.S.-Panama military agreement for the defense of the canal. The United States launched diplomatic, economic, commercial, and monetary blockades and suspended payments of all foreign aid, including its actual payments for the canal. The economic blockade prohibited money transfers from the U.S. and individuals and companies to the Panamanian government. A lot of syllables in here, which faced increasing escalation of the U.S. military presence and aggression in Panama. Finally, after years of Panama's resistance to sanctions, punishments, and aggression, the Bush administration launched the 1989 invasion. So again, it shows how it works. They were fine with all the drug dealing and all that stuff before. And actually they prefer that because then they have a pretext to come after you when they want to take something from you. And the other interesting thing here is the pattern of behavior where they will place sanctions on these countries when they don't behave. And then the sanctions are intended to make the country poorer, make the people angrier. Of course, governments do the horrible thing that they shouldn't do in taking a more defensive posture when they are, feeling at risk, and they become more dictatorial, which all governments are essentially, but that's on a scale, and it gives increasing justification to invade. It really isn't about getting those countries to comply, because the things that the US is asking the countries that are sanctioned to comply with are, impossible in many. It's like giving up your country essentially, and just letting all these foreign corporations come in and take your resources for pennies on the dollar. So the whole point of sanctions is the ultimate invasion, and making the ultimate invasion or the invasion that ultimately happens much easier to do, both on a propaganda level and on a physical level, because the country is just legitimately weaker, doesn't have enough money to defend itself. So the wild thing about that is, let's take a look at the Wikipedia entry for this and some of the results that happened from this. So let's see. About 20,000 people lost their homes and became refugees as a result of urban warfare that took place in the streets. About 2,700 families were displaced by the El Chirro fire and were given $6,500 each by the U.S. to build a new house or apartment in the selected areas. However, numerous problems were reported with the new constructions just 2 years after the invasion. Those displaced by the war have new homes, but let's see. So that's only 10, like a little more than 10% of the families were given $6,500 to build a new home. And I'm sure exchange rates are definitely significant, but still, and that's, not even, you still displace people from their homes. And of course, we did see apartment buildings that got hit in the attack this week. I'm sure there's not going to be 20,000 people from what we saw, because of the fact that this operation happened overnight and not a few days. But wait, let's see how long that, because I know he was holed up in the in that religious institution. I forget what the kind of, I think it was like a Vatican embassy, something like that. It was a little bit more of a prolonged thing before he got out. But a lot of people think that Venezuela is going to be a quick thing, and I am very unsure of it. I really do think that we're seeing an ongoing kind of situation here. So let's look at this here. It has some of the pictures of what went down and some of the interviews with the people. This is where that fire went down. And so this is one of the guys. He says, "Do you see this? This remains as a memory of the shots fired." He points to the bullet hole left in the wall from the invasion down the street from his house. So when this is, I wanted to show this because, people sit at home in their houses here, and they just see these other places as battlefields and not neighborhoods. And they're like, yeah, whatever, go into that battlefield and get the bad guy. And it's like, no, you're going through people's neighborhoods, and you are creating a massive amount of instability in their country, to the point where people do not know how things are going to get shipped places next week, or even like, are the people in their government going to get run? Are the people are going to get paid? are the people who pick up the trash going to get paid, stuff like that. And that is why, even though I am like very much an anarchist, I've always said that you can't flip a switch and make it happen overnight. And that's why I realistically don't even think that it can happen in our lifetime at this point. Though I do think it is a ideal that, we should work towards. I did at one point think that it was going to be possible in the early internet days. I thought like this new technology was going to bring the world together and war was going to be impossible and we were just all going to be all connected. And that was a crazy, crazy pipe dream. I don't know what I was thinking at this point, but I that was back in my rave days. So, but let's see. Over that night, nearly 30,000 U.S. soldiers attacked positions across Panama. So I don't know the exact number of people that were involved in this one. Probably less, but things have changed over the years, and I do still think that like it is important to like this. We were alive during this. Or I mean, I was. A lot of you probably weren't because I'm old ahead at this point. But I mean, I was just a couple years old at this point. But this was within my lifetime. So, and worse has happened since then. Like, look at what we've done to Libya. That's another thing that I wanted to show. The whole Libya thing, because that was just a couple years ago with Gaddafi, who was presented as this big mean guy, and he probably did do some terrible things. But at the same time, Libya is significantly worse now. It was a very, very kind of advanced society at that point. And now there are like slave markets there because there was just this vacuum of power that developed and there was no kind of transition of power. There was no kind of thing to work towards. And it ended up being a total disaster. So let's take a look at this. U.S. military interventions loom large 10 years after Obama attacked Libya. So this is probably like 2004 or 2021. Yeah, okay. So that happened in 2011. Wow, it doesn't feel like that long ago. This anniversary of another American war should remind us that next time probably won't be different. And this was said many years ago. I'm not sure what war we were about to get into around this time. 10 years ago today, the United States under, so I guess it's like 15 years ago today, the United States under President Barack Obama intervened in the nascent Libyan civil war using one of the most common tools of the American statecraft, the Tomahawk land attack missile. U.S. forces, why do they have to put the weapon porn in the fucking article? It's so ridiculous. U.S. forces led a coalition of NATO and Arab League partners in a campaign initially predicated on enforcing a no-fly zone and preventing massacres by the dictator Muammar Gaddafi. So yeah, at the time there was this, I wouldn't even call it a civil war yet at that point. Maybe it was, but like there were rebellions happening. There were uprisings happening. They were on the verge of a revolution to some extent. I don't know if it was a full-on civil war until it started getting nudged along by, U.S. and NATO. So, but like I said, they had a lot of mineral wealth. It was a very advanced society. A lot of the propaganda in the U.S. had people ramped up. It's like, we're just saving these poor people from a dictator. And while he was brutal to his opponents, there were a lot of people that lived decent lives, much better than they do now there. After the country was once more thrown into a civil war in 2014, Libyans today may finally have grounds for cautious optimism. A ceasefire, let's see. To the Western leaders who decided to intervene on the side of the rebellion, Libya offered a tantalizing mirage. A wealthy Arab country with a small population, close to Europe and yearning to throw off a yoke of a brutal and bizarre dictator. Despite the disaster of the Iraq War and the bloody stalemate in Afghanistan, it was easy to embrace what the investor Sir John Templeton once deemed the four most expensive words in the English language. This time, it's different. And yeah, I mean, and that was Obama too. And he campaigned on ending Bush's wars, just like Trump campaigned on ending Bush's wars and Obama's wars. And now now Trump, Freudian slip there, is starting his own wars that somebody else is going to continue and not even even though they're complaining about it now. Because like he said, even though at first he said, oh, it's over now, then he came out and said, oh, well, we can't just like let it descend into madness. We got to make sure that the right people get involved. And that involves an insurgency usually. But yeah, so let's see what we got here. Intervening in Libya was different from invading in Iraq and Afghanistan, to be sure. U.S. concern for Libya was purely humanitarian and could not even be spun to serve it. What? No. This is, of course, NBC News. Yeah, so Gaddafi was about to he was about to start. I think he was breaking away from the global banking system, I think. I want to look that up and just make sure I'm not like passing along an urban legend, but I'm pretty sure that Gaddafi was breaking away from banking system, because that is a hilarious bar here where they say purely humanitarian. Literally nothing that this country has ever done was humanitarian when it comes to foreign policy. So let's see. I'm seeing something from the Real News Network. They're pretty good. They're actually from Baltimore, which is the closest city to me. I'm very far from the city, but it is the closest city to me, and they are based out of there. They have some good content, and it's usually very well fact checked. So let's see. This is my first time running through it, so but I did want to look at this aspect of it, because I heard that he was kind of doing something with gold in the banking system, like he was going away from dollars. He wasn't doing something with the petrodollar. I don't remember the exact narrative and if it was correct. If anybody remembers in the chat or has any links there, let me know. But oh yeah, it was the same thing with Assad. Like, Assad wasn't a great guy either, but the reason why they wanted to get rid of him had nothing to do with humanitarianism. So let's see. Chaos in Libya was deliberate. It was deliberate because Libya was a stable African society in North Africa, where the leader of North Libya wanted to use the resources of Libya for the reconstruction of Africa, the water resources, the oil resources, the financial resources, and the intelligence of the Libyan people. NATO intervened in spite of the differences between different sections of NATO, okay, between France and the United States. So I guess different countries disagreed with it within NATO. So he says, I don't quite understand why the West simply wanted to destroy Libyan society. Gaddafi's regime was playing footsies with the IMF, with the World Bank. So that's interesting. That goes against that thing I heard. His sons were knocking the gavel at the stock exchange. In fact, one of his sons was visiting American military manufacturers, negotiating arms deal. Yeah, I know that he was trying to get acceptance from the West. And that's what many of these people do when they see that they're being threatened by the U.S. military or NATO. They're like, I'll give you whatever you want. That's even what Maduro did. He said, I'll give you all the oil. A couple of maybe even months ago. When the boat stuff started. They were doing oil and gas deals. There's reports from the World Bank praising his reforms and privatization of the Libyan banking system. So look at that. That is the complete opposite of that meme that I've heard. I'm going to have to look deeper into that. It's still this speaker here. Let's see who this person is. This speaker here, I guess he's a professor. So he's still saying that there are there are resource issues, but it wasn't the banking issue that some people like to share on the internet. I would like more sources on that if anybody has them, though, because that is an interesting rabbit hole. Because Libya is one of the cases where I haven't done much research on the resource extraction part. I just know that it ended up being a disaster. So that's maybe something that I should check out. Libya doesn't make it into the video that I'm making now because it focuses on like mostly the Cold War stuff instead of World War IV, which is basically the War on Terror, which will probably be the sequel to that, I guess, which will probably include Libya. But let's see what he says. So the one thing I was reading was from the interviewer, and this is from the professor. He says, you're missing one factor, that every political leader seeks political legitimacy. And in the case of Libya, the legitimacy of the leader had to come from presenting himself as someone who was a part of the African Union and wanted to build an African monetary fund, an African central bank, and an African common currency. And that was a danger to not only the euro, because, oh, okay, so this must be the thing. Because Sarkozy said, we're moving to fight to save the euro, but it would present a threat to the dollar. Moreover, the Libyan leadership had moved to take over the Arab Banking Corporation in Bahrain, and the Libyan leadership had over 200 billion in foreign reserves. So yes, correct, they were playing footsie with the West, but at the same time, the leadership was also capable of nationalist pressures inside Libya, and inside of Africa, so they could have nationalized oil companies in the midst of this global capitalist crisis, and the West did not want any surprises, where Libya would want to call the Africans to turn away from the dollar as the reserve currency and to use African resources such as gold as the new currency for all of Africa. Let's see. He's asking if he has evidence of this. Libya have 200 billion in reserves, and of Libya, moreover. So I was searching the wrong thing. He wanted to build an African monetary fund. That was maybe the thing that I was seeing. Let's search Gaddafi African Monetary Fund. Let's see here. Africa's Faustian bargain with the international. What's this? Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. Okay, so this is 2004. So this is what? 5-6 years before they started. Well, 5-6 years before they ultimately got to Gaddafi. But this, if we tried to trace it back, I wouldn't be surprised if this is when their propaganda started against him. And again, not saying that he's a good guy. No leader of any country is a good guy. They're all terrible people. That's how they got in their positions. But that's why any of them can point at any other one of them and say, that guy's a criminal. We should arrest him, because it's a table full of mob bosses, every single one of them. The Libyan leader of the revolution, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, has called for the establishment of an African central bank. He made the call during an address to the Extraordinary General Assembly taking place in Tripoli. He told the meeting that the world has changed dramatically and the world is a map of bigger blocks. Oh, look at this. They hit us with the centralbanking.com with the paywall and some bullshit. But at least they did let us know that this is saying there's little evidence of it, but we just saw that in the and this is the other thing I was talking about. There was a point in time where he was using, like, right here, 1969 to 73, it used oil money to fund social welfare programs, which led to housing. So he was like using the resources. Now, I'm not sure if he got more brutal later in his dictatorship or later in his regime, but that is just an interesting fact that I see. The BRICS go for gold. And also this BRICS is something that I'm going to talk quite a bit about as the show goes on. This is a economic alliance originally between Brazil, Russia, Iran, and China, but it's expanding. It is now many countries. It's just still called BRICS. Oh, and South. I think their S is something as well. But that is kind of pushing for a multipolar world where the United States just can't sanction everybody. It'll give a different trading block for people to go to, essentially. So a lot of the sources I have here are not great, but literally centralbanking.com at least said that he called for a central bank in 2004. Now, an African central bank, which would separate them from the colonialist World Bank and International Monetary Fund. So I just think that that's definitely an interesting angle to the whole thing. Let's see if I had anything else. I could probably show the very beginning. Let's see. Yep, they promise you the world, and then once they get into office, they say, "Oh, sorry." Yeah, exactly, and that's what they do every time. Every president that has won, that has ran a campaign over the past, like 10 years, ever since Bush, has ran on an anti-war platform. And then the minute they get in there, they're like, "Oh, this isn't war. This is just the stuff we've already been doing. We're just keeping the peace there. That's not war at all." And that's what the strength through peace thing is. It is like they're saying like an abusive relationship is essentially peace. So let's see, because of the fact that I don't have to, where's the new, see if I downloaded it. I could show the very beginning of the video that I'm making. Maybe I could do a whole, trying to figure out where I downloaded it to. Yeah, here it is in the downloads folder. So the concept of this, and this is something that I've thought for a long time, and I've definitely said this on the show before, because I've been talking about this video that I'm making in the concept. But yeah, so it's basically that after World War II, we did have another World War III, and it was essentially the Cold War, what we call the Cold War. And there was this kind of propagandistic manipulation of language to downplay the impacts and effects of that time period and the military actions taken between that time period. Yeah, so yeah, definitely send me that video along, King K, and I'll cover it in a future stream. So yeah, they if there is not some other big world war, then there's no Nuremberg trials. There's no new Nuremberg trials for this big messed up thing that happened. And I bring all of these Cold War conflicts together and show that this is actually a massive, really messed up world war. So, and I would say by that same token, like I said earlier, the sequel to this video is probably going to be World War IV, which is the War on Terror. And because we weren't just in the Middle East in the War on Terror, there's been a lot of regime change that's happened. So let's see. I'm gonna pull up this other screen. Let's see. And this should actually play because of the fact that it's from my computer and I'm not streaming it. So you could kind of see that this is the movie I've been working on. And well, yeah, it's an hour and a half long. So I don't know what to, I guess a video essay is what they call it these days. But I'm new to video editing. I'm using iMovie. I'm doing a couple of things to try to make it work. So I'm running on like a lot of stock footage and things like that. But I figured that I need to start doing this stuff, and then I'll get better at it. This was originally going to be a book, and maybe it will still be a book, but you know, a lot more people watch videos than read books, as I've learned after 15 years of writing books. So let's play the first little bit of this, and maybe I could skip around a bit and show you because it really relates to this whole Venezuela situation. The language we use to describe our history and the world around us shapes our reality. Those who control the words control which questions get asked, which victims get remembered, and which crimes get prosecuted. Examples of this are everywhere, especially when war and the violence of hierarchies are being described. This has been discussed at length when it comes to the selective use of passive voice in media and the newspeak and was hidden in plain sight using language. That part in the half century following World War. That part with the world spinning is just a placeholder. That's probably going to be me talking into the mic for that part. I put a couple of placeholders in here because I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this here and that there, but I just kind of want to get I want to show this off now since I've been working on it, and it is somewhat relevant to what we've been talking about in the news, and also get some feedback if anybody says, oh, that looks messed up, or you know, or yeah, and anything like that. Let's see. Or two, war continued to touch every inhabited continent, costing millions of lives and fundamentally restructuring the political and economic order of the planet. But we call this time the Cold War. Of course, it's not recognized like this in other parts of the world, because these were very serious conflicts that are still impacting people. Every country that went communist was a market lost, a source of resources denied, a place where American corporations could no longer extract profits. Yeah, so this is going to be released hopefully in about 2 weeks on this page, on this YouTube channel. I'm about 35 minutes into splicing the video together, and it's about an hour and a half long. So I got a little bit of work on it, but I'm hoping it'll only take about 2 weeks to finish. This explains why the United States was willing to tolerate right-wing dictatorships was not shy about the true intentions of U.S. foreign policy. I did something funny with this guy's picture coming up that when I quote him, basically, I'm curious on feedback about the editing and if it's distracting or if it's engaging. In a 1948 memo to the State Department, he wrote with unusual candor about what American foreign policy actually required. I don't know where that cartoon came from, but it was hilarious. So yeah, this part right here, let's see. I'm going to skip around a little bit because I had a big placeholder. And then this one is the Korean War, which is much less interesting than well, it is interesting, but it's not as related to what's happening in Venezuela right now as the Panama or the Guatemala situation. Let's see. Today, 7 decades later, Korea taught American politicians several. One of them. Damn. They are still there. We'll have to stay there and get ahead. Korea taught American politicians several important lessons. They learned that intervention could be sold to the public as defensive, even when it wasn't. They learned that massive civilian casualties could be hidden or justified. They learned that wars could be fought without Congress declaring war. They also learned that communist countries would fight back hard, requiring a sustained commitment of resources. And they learned that allies would accept American troops on their soil indefinitely, as long as the alternative was presented as communist invasion. Guatemala, the template for corporate coup. The United States had been... So yeah, we'll watch this one, and then I'll probably cut it for the night because the rest of it isn't as finished. But the situation in Guatemala was and how early it was in the development of our country. A lot of people think that this colonialism outside of the borders of the United States is a new thing, but when they talk about the Monroe Doctrine, that is 200 years old. That was when they were still expanding the U.S. borders within the United States that we know today. So yeah. This is quite interesting. Let's check it out. Intervening in Central America and the Caribbean for decades before World War III began, not to stop communism, which barely existed there, but to protect American corporate interests. Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler, one of the most decorated soldiers in American history, described the system with brutal honesty in his 1935 book, War is a Racket.
I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service, and during that period, I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico, and especially Tampico, safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National Citibank boys to collect revenues in. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers in 1902 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interests in 1916. I helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies in 1903. In China in 1927, I helped see to it that Standard Oil went on its way.
Butler was describing what would later be. Yeah, so this was a guy in the 1920s who had been high level in the military for many years. Many of you have probably heard of him before. But think about like how many places that he talked about colonizing in that time. And this is stuff that we're not even told in history. Called banana republics, basically colonies where American corporations owned the land, controlled the infrastructure, ran the governments, and called in American military force whenever local people demanded better conditions. The biggest of these corporations was the United Fruit Company. At its height in the 1950s, United Fruit owned 42% of Guatemala's land, controlled its only major port, owned the railroad, and ran the telephone system. It paid almost nothing in taxes and basically ran Guatemala as its own private kingdom. United Fruit had been in Guatemala since the 1890s. Through deals with friendly dictators, the company acquired hundreds of thousands of acres of the best farmland. Much of it sat unused, held to keep competitors out, while Guatemalan peasants starved on tiny plots. Workers lived in company towns, got paid in scrip that could only be spent at company stores, and had no labor rights. If they tried to organize, they were fired or eliminated. The company controlled the only railroad, the main port, and the telegraph system. If you wanted to export anything from Guatemala, you had to go through United Fruit and pay whatever they demanded. They didn't just dominate the banana industry, they had a stranglehold on the entire economy. Politically, United Fruit made sure Guatemalan governments served its interests. They bribed officials, funded friendly politicians, and worked with dictators who crushed any dissent. United Fruit liked dictatorships. They provided order, cheap labor, and no interference. In 1944, a popular uprising brought something like democracy to Guatemala for the first time. Then, in 1951, Jacobo Arbenz was elected president on a platform of land reform. He believed Guatemala's resources should benefit Guatemalans. That made him a target. Arbenz's land reform, Decree 900, was simple. If you owned land and weren't farming most of it, the government could buy the unused portions and give them to landless peasants. You'd be compensated based on the value you'd declared for taxes. And here's what enraged United Fruit. They'd been declaring their land was worth almost nothing to dodge taxes. Now they'd be paid based on those same low numbers. The company launched a massive propaganda campaign, framing land reform as communist theft, and they had deep connections in Washington. Former CIA Director Walter Bedell Smith sat on United Fruit's board, while Secretary of State John Foster Dulles and CIA Director Alan Dulles had both worked for the law firm that represented the company. They convinced the Eisenhower administration that Arbenz was a communist threat. It was a lie. Arbenz was doing land reform similar to what America itself had pushed in Japan after World War II. He wasn't even a Communist Party member, but the Eisenhower administration, staffed with men who had ties to United Fruit, decided to overthrow him anyway. In 1953, the CIA started planning to remove the democratically elected president and replace him with a dictatorship. The CIA operation combined propaganda, economic pressure, and paramilitary action. They set up a radio station broadcasting lies about Arbenz, recruited Guatemalan exiles to train at bases in Honduras and Nicaragua, and picked a colonel named Carlos Castillo Armas to lead the coup. This is the same playbook that would later fail spectacularly at the Bay of Pigs. The U.S. also squeezed Guatemala economically, cutting off aid, pressuring other countries to stop trading with them, and working with United Fruit to create shortages. The goal was to make life hard enough that Guatemalans would blame Arbenz. In June 1954, Castillo Armas invaded from Honduras. The actual operation was tiny, a few hundred men and a handful of planes, but CIA propaganda made it look like a massive uprising. Radio broadcasts claimed huge armies were marching on the capital. Planes dropped leaflets demanding Arbenz resign. And that's another repeating thing that happens throughout history, where they have a very a small uprising that may even be genuine, but they use the media to make it look like it's so much bigger. Like the thing with the statue that we were watching earlier, most of that crowd was, people from the U.S., whether it was news reporters or Marines that were off duty, that were in that crowd. There might have been 100 Iraqis in that crowd or something like that. And yes, they were very happy to see the statue toppled, but at the same time, it was very, very well manipulated for propaganda. And it was very easy back in these days because you could just drop leaflets, and now you have to be a lot more complex, and it's a lot easier to see through because we can see everything happening in real time. And there's a lot of people with cameras that can prove things wrong. Agents spread rumors the government was collapsing. Arbenz asked the United States for help. He was a democratically elected leader facing a foreign-backed invasion. He thought he'd get international support. Instead, the U.S. refused and blocked UN intervention. His own military abandoned him, so he resigned. Castillo Armas took power and immediately gave the land back to United Fruit. Unions were outlawed. Peasants were forced off their land. Guatemala went back to dictatorship, this time openly backed by the CIA. What followed was one of the longest and bloodiest civil wars in Latin American history, the 40-year bloodbath. After the coup, repression started immediately. Anyone connected to Arbenz was targeted. Thousands were arrested, thousands more eliminated. The CIA provided lists of people to eliminate, the same technique they'd used later in Indonesia and across Latin America. A series of US-backed military governments ruled Guatemala, each one crushing any opposition. Elections were rigged. Opposition candidates were taken out. The military controlled everything. In the 1960s, a guerrilla insurgency emerged. The Guatemalan military, trained and armed by the United States, responded by targeting entire communities. The logic was simple. If guerrillas had support in Mayan villages, then the villages themselves were the enemy. Between 1960 and 1996, soldiers massacred hundreds of indigenous communities in deliberate campaigns of extermination. The violence peaked in the early 1980s under Efrain Rios Montt, an evangelical Christian. Thanks for the feedback. I appreciate it. Yeah, I've been working on this script for a really long time, and I finally was like, I got to start this, and I worked for quite a bit, but it's coming together nicely. I'm happy to hear that. Thank you. Who believed he was doing God's work. His forces destroyed over 600 villages and wiped out tens of thousands of indigenous people. The Reagan administration backed him. Reagan called Rios Montt a man of great personal integrity who was getting a bum rap from human rights organizations. American officials knew about the massacres, but they didn't care. Indigenous Mayan lives were expendable. The Truth Commission that investigated after the war concluded the military had committed genocide. 93% of human rights violations were committed by the state. Over 200,000 people were disappeared, and the United States had supported the whole thing. The coup had nothing to do with communism. It was about protecting United Fruit's profits. 200,000 Guatemalans died over 40 years so a fruit company could keep exploiting the country. United Fruit got exactly what it wanted. The company later became Chiquita Brands International. In the 2000s, Chiquita got caught paying millions to right-wing death squads in Colombia. They paid a fine. Nobody went to prison. This is how American foreign policy actually works in Latin America. Corporations figure out what they want. The government makes up a national security. That's another place where I had a placeholder. I think that might have been what I had. French Indochina. Yeah, that's in the that gets into Vietnam after that. But yeah, that is the Guatemala portion of the Cold War is World War III until I come up with a different title for it. Maybe I will use that as a title. But yeah, that is, and it's so similar to what we see now, from the justifications that are used for it and the reasons for entering the country. It's the same playbook from 100 years ago almost, and even probably farther back from that, because this is colonialism. It's a very old thing. It's just that we have new tools to do it, unfortunately. So yeah, that I think probably brings me to the end. I appreciate y'all hanging with me and keeping me going here. I'll definitely be back tomorrow night at 10, and I'm not sure what I'll be going over. There's probably plenty of things developing. I also still have some Epstein stuff on the back burner to get to as well. But yeah, thanks a lot. Hope everybody has a great night and a great start to their week. And I will see you tomorrow at 10. Thank you.